What is going on, everybody? My name is Tom Kelly, and this is Clean Cut Audio. On this channel, my goal is to teach you how to make a great sounding podcast, and ideally, do it on any budget. Now, this video is going to go way over budget, what most people would deem excessive. However, we do not use the term overkill on this channel because whatever makes you happy makes you happy. And I gotta tell you, great gear and great sounding audio makes me happy, so I put in the money. But that may not be you, I get that. So if you're looking for a more budget-friendly way to record a podcast, I just put out another video where I compare a $7,000, a $700, and a $300 signal chain to see if there's a big difference between all three. Do we really need to spend the money? Is it just for fun? Is it just for show? Can you make a great sounding podcast with $300? So if you're on a budget, definitely feel free to check out that video or keep watching this one, because all I'm doing today is answering the simple question, how do I record and mix my podcast? Let's do it. Now, if you've seen my studio tour video from a few months ago, you may already be familiar with some of the components in my signal chain. However, I'll go over it all in a little bit more detail today. The first thing to know, and probably the most important part of your signal chain, is the room that you are recording in. My room is a 10 by 10 foot or like 3 meter by 3 meter bedroom. 8-foot tall ceilings. It is a very typical American bedroom, and I outfitted it to be a podcast recording, editing, and mixing studio. In it, there are 18 6-inch Roxel safe and sound bass traps with some diffuser fronts on a few of them, and it sounds absolutely phenomenal in here. The frequency response is very flat, which is helpful for mixing, and there is no room reverberation, which is great for recording. So number one, the room's got to sound good if you want a good sounding podcast, or does it? We'll check on that later on. You may have noticed I'm using a Shure SM7b. It's a pretty typical broadcasting microphone. The reason I love it is because I think I have an annoying amount of 7 and 8 kilohertz in my voice, and this microphone naturally attenuates or removes some of that frequency. So I think it does a good job of smoothing out my voice. I love the built-in pop filter, and I love the internal shock mounting. It makes this microphone so amazing to use, so versatile. I would never want to use any other microphone other than the Shure SM7b. However, you can sound good on pretty much any other microphone. I think I'm just using like a live wire cable, pretty middle of the road. I think I probably got it at Guitar Center. I put most of my money with cables into my monitors and stuff, so I didn't spend a whole lot on the XLR cable. Really, it's nothing special. I'm going into an Apogee Ensemble Thunderbolt interface. I love this interface so much. It's got like 30 in, 32 out or something like that, so it definitely exceeds the needs of podcasting. However, I really wanted something that can grow with me as I get back into music production, as I have a little bit more time to do it. I really wanted something that would be technology advancements not included, something I could pretty much have for the rest of my life. Plus, I knew the preamps on this are going to be amazing, 75 decibels of incredibly clean gain, which means no cloud lifter needed. And it also had built-in sends and returns, which I was really looking for because the next piece in my chain here is a Millennia STT-1 channel strip. Now, I do have the transformer engaged on this, which I think filters out a little bit of the noise somehow. I'm not really sure, but I think it does a good job of cleaning up the signal a little bit, and it adds like the tiniest bit of saturation in there, which again, the Shure SM7b is a pretty mellow microphone. I wanted a channel strip that would honor its pretty mellow, pretty natural sound while adding some depth and some warmth to the mix without having that like kind of crunchy Neve sound. So I landed on the Millennia channel strip for a couple different reasons. You have solid state and tube topologies. So you can run the preamp on this in solid state or tube. You can run the EQ and compressors in solid state or tube. And then you have the transformer in or out. There's a de-esser. It's a really, really amazing channel strip, and I think it's perfect for what I need it to do. If we take a look at these EQ switches, I'm doing a few simple things that is pretty common in most podcasting. The very first thing is I have a tiny bit of a shelf reducing everything at and below 270 hertz. So this is just getting rid of a lot of like real boominess that doesn't need to be there because I'm pretty much on top of this microphone. You'll see in the low mids that I'm reducing a bit of 28 hertz. However, the 10x multiplier is on there. So I'm actually reducing quite a bit of 280 hertz. This is going to be like real boxy, real boominess. We don't want that in the signal. I'm usually getting rid of quite a bit of that 225 to 320 range. Not a lot of good can come from that range, but it's really important that you don't overdo it because then you lose a lot of the body and the depth of the voice. I'm taking that AK a little bit further and I'm reducing like a decibel of it. Again, it looks like it's 800 hertz, but the 10x multiplier is on, so I'm actually reducing 8K. The thing that I like about analog gear is I think it's like a decibel. It doesn't really matter how exact it is because what I'm doing is I'm using my ears on how the EQ sounds. I don't care if it's 1.2 decibels or if it's 2.4. It doesn't really matter. What matters is how it sounds. And with this setting, I think it sounds pretty good. So I rolled with it. You'll also see that I have a bit of shelf starting at 21 kilohertz. I could probably go more with this because you'll see in the equalization that I do in my mixing that I'm actually cutting out a bit more of that range. Now with my compressor, you'll see that it does very little. I don't really want it to capture a ton and clamp down on the voice. This is a pretty grabby compressor, so I'm not trying to overdo it in this stage, but just kind of hook it up a little bit. At some point, I might switch it over to the de-esser to do de-essing rather than compression with the channel strip, but I'm kind of waiting for an API 2500 plus to do that and incorporate more outboard gear into my signal chain. But for right now, I'm rolling with the tiniest bit of compression on the input end to feed Pro Tools a more even signal. From there, I'm just sending it back into the Apogee for its world-class ADA conversion. Doesn't really get better than Apogee in terms of conversion, so it's sending a very pristine, a very accurate signal into Pro Tools. One thing I do want to mention before we get into Pro Tools here is that my mic technique on camera is pretty bad. It's because I'm looking at the lens. When I recorded this sample that you're about to hear, I'm pretty much directly talking into the microphone. My lips are grazing the pop filter of this mic. And a lot of people will say this is bad mic technique. You want to be 2 to 3 inches away, 3 finger lengths away. The important thing to know about the Shure SM7b is if we take off this pop filter, what actually matters is how close you are to the diaphragm. The diaphragm of the Shure SM7b is all the way back here. So that's already 3 finger lengths away from the grill, and then the pop filter adds about a half an inch as well. So when I put the pop filter on this and I'm directly on the microphone, I'm actually 3 to 3.5 inches away. So I don't mind getting right up on this microphone because I'm compensating a little bit by reducing a bit of that proximity effect in EQ, in the signal chain, and in the mix. But this microphone also does so well with plosives. It gets rid of all of like the big P's and the B's, but also the diaphragm is well made so it doesn't just like explode and distort if something really hard does hit it. So it's real easy to fix in post. Speaking of that, let's get into Pro Tools here. So I recorded a sample for you using good microphone technique. You can see it's just this 27-second thing here. And if you want to download this audio to work on it, you can check out the link in the description. It'll take you to a Dropbox link where you can download this audio. Because what I'm really interested in is how someone else might mix my audio compared to how I would, because everyone does it differently. There's no right or wrong. There's just preference. So the very first thing I do with all of my tracks is I open RX Connect. So I'm going to send all of this into IzoTope RX 8. With a single click of a button, I'm going to run an EQ curve, which is doing a high pass. So it's just getting rid of all of this low end that's unnecessary. I'm doing deplosive. These are my settings. Feel free to steal them. I think they're perfect, especially for the SM7b, which doesn't allow really any plosives to come through. I'm not clipping, so maybe I can actually turn that off. Do a little bit of mouth declick, right? Pretty subtle, factory default, but adding a little bit of click widening. And I'm actually doing adaptive phase rotation. Don't really have time for that, but it's a pretty easy thing just to throw on there. I'm going to hit render and it's going to run through all of these back to back. And since this is only 30 seconds, we are pretty much done. Perfect. So now I'm going to send this back to Pro Tools here, hit render, and boom, all of my RXing is done. And now we can start mixing our signal. So the noise floor in my studio is pretty much non-existent, but I always throw in the tiniest bit of denoise here. Actually, I can probably do like way less. So just voice denoise. I'm still using RX8. Haven't needed to upgrade to 10, but voice denoise, love it. I always start every chain with it. If it quote unquote doesn't need it, I still throw on just a little bit because we're going to be increasing the signal so much later on that it's nice to just get rid of any noise that may come up later on. Next thing, I've got a de-esser. This is by Lindell from Plugin Alliance. I'm getting rid of, man, my nasal range in my voice is pretty overwhelming, and I have less of an issue with S's and more of an issue with like ch sounds. So that's getting rid of that like 2400 range. We can listen to what that range sounds like. This is Tom Kelly recording my voice on a Shure SM7b, and this is what it's reducing. STT-1 channel strip where I'm doing a little bit of EQ. So we can see on the gain reduction meter, it's only taking out like 4 decibels here and there. Mix knob is turned all the way up, adding no air. I really don't ever want to reduce more than like 8 decibels because it just gets really like artificial sounding then. So I have the range set to 8 so that it never cranks it down to like 20, but it's averaging like 4 decibels of gain reduction. Now for a very long time, I was trying to do only analog equalization just as a challenge. However, I do find that Pro-Q3 and any plugins like this that offer, you know, as many bands as narrow or wide as you want really allows me to hone in exactly on how I want my voice to sound. So this kind of looks like a lot, but it's actually not doing much. I could really simplify this if I wanted to, but this was me spending just way too much time on this signal chain here. So the way that I started this equalization curve was I was investigating this range between 250 and 750. It's usually pretty unpleasant. So I put a point right in the middle and I reduced it by 2 3/4 decibel. And we can listen to what that range sounds like.
Tom Kelly recording my voice on a Shure SM7b.
It's not the most unpleasant sounding, but I've got a lot of it. And most of that is because I'm like right on this mic. So I'm reducing a little bit of it later on. Now 265 or so, usually not a pleasant range. We can listen to what this sounds like. If we boost that, this is Tom Kelly recording my voice on a Shure SM7b into an Apogee Ensemble. A little bit of a ring that I don't like, so I'm just trying to get rid of that here. I'm going to turn this resolution back to 12 decibels. Just getting rid of a little bit of that ring. So actually, if you notice, I'm reducing 132 hertz and I'm reducing 264 hertz. 132 is half of 264. So this is going to be a resonance. And these two frequencies here are actually related. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I actually have a course, a very thorough course on equalization, the beginner guide to equalization for podcast, voiceover, and broadcasting, and the advanced version. Between these two courses, there's between 7 and 8 hours of content that goes a lot into the physics of sound. We learn about harmonics in octaves and how the room affects your voice, how it affects mixing. It is probably one of the most detailed courses on equalization possibly ever made, but especially for podcasting, it goes real deep. I'll put a link in the description. I'll offer a coupon code for any YouTube viewers. Enter the code YouTube for 20% off the course. Anyways, back to it. Let's keep learning what I'm doing here. I didn't want to reduce too much of the body and the warmth with these big moves here, so I put in 3/4 of a decibel at 90 hertz, but I have it dynamically so it's not constantly boosting. It's allowing it to bump it up a little bit if it needs it, but primarily it's not really doing anything. This is Tom Kelly recording my voice on a Shure SM7b. So you can see sometimes this yellow line here, which is the output curve. This is what is actually being affected. It's moving down. And then when my voice could use a little bit more of that 90 hertz is bumping it up, not even a full decibel. Super subtle moves here. Now 911 hertz. I don't know what I was thinking here. Not a great sound. Don't love it. So I got rid of a little bit of that. And then again, a little bit more of that nasal range. And you'll notice I'm cutting a decibel constantly. And then I have the dynamic EQ on, allowing another 1.82 decibels of cutting if it ever needs it, which is primarily for de-essing. So this is actually like secondary de-essing here. This is Tom Kelly recording my voice on a Shure SM7b into an... All right, next thing, I'm cutting a little bit of 6K dynamically. So this is, again, more like de-essing. And I'm also boosting just to allow a little bit more on either end of this to come up. You can see if we get rid of it, it's kind of flat, it's reducing here. So by adding a little bit of a boost over the cut, what we're really doing is just boosting on either side of it. And then you'll see I have a high shelf centered at 12.5 kilohertz. So it's further reducing all of these super airy frequencies, again, dynamically. So if it needs a little bit more of a cut, it'll do it. And it's not doing anything below 10 kilohertz. This is... So all those like mosquito frequencies don't love it. Let's listen to before and after with the EQ. This is Tom Kelly recording my voice on a Shure SM7b into an Apogee Ensemble, then being sent to a Millennia STT-1 channel strip where I'm doing... So you'll notice I'm not really adding any low end. Minuscule amount, which is normally around 0. However, I'm not adding a ton of low end. I'm actually getting rid of a lot of these lower mids, and it makes the voice sound so much fuller. It adds essentially a spotlight on these lower frequencies, the fundamentals, between 100 and 200 hertz, the really like pleasant, rich, full low end. Rather than boosting it, I'm cutting stuff around it that's actually louder and more distracting to allow for more room for those pleasant frequencies to come out. So that's why I'm primarily doing subtractive EQ. I'm getting rid of anything that's annoying and kind of a problem, overwhelming, and it allows the good frequencies to come out more rather than leaving the bad frequencies in and boosting more of the good ones. I find it much easier and much pleasant on the ears to reduce bad frequencies. So I'm pretty much always doing subtractive EQ. Rarely am I adding a ton of anything. So you'll notice that everything up to this point I'm getting rid of, right? I'm getting rid of noise, I'm getting rid of S's, and I'm cutting some harsh frequencies. So the goal is to be only left with the good stuff. Now I'm switching into dynamics, which is I'm trying to make everything louder. Now that I've pared everything down to only the good sounding stuff, I want it all to be louder. So as you might know by now, I love Vocal Rider. However, that might be changing as Waves just dropped an atomic bomb on their entire company. I will probably be moving away from this plugin at some point. However, the goal of this, and I will do another video because this is the most requested information. How do I use Vocal Rider? Why do I use it? Why don't I just compress more? So essentially we have some really high peaks here. Not really high, normal high. And then we can see moments like this, it gets a little soft. I don't want to compress everything so much to level it out. What I want to do is start off by just increasing the volume a little bit on some of these lower portions. So when I run Vocal Rider, what you'll see it doing is essentially nothing for these high points, and it's going to be increasing the volume a little bit at the lower points. I have the range set to 3.7, so it cannot boost by more than 3.7 decibels, and I'm just trying to even out some of these lower portions here. This is Tom Kelly recording my voice on a Shure SM7b into an Apogee Ensemble, then being sent to a... All right, so you'll notice the beginning of my sentences, I start a little bit louder, so it's boosting nothing, and as I kind of trail off and I run out of breath, it boosted a little bit, tiny bit. This is very, very subtle stuff. Now I'm going to come in here with the API 2500, and this is my compressor. So I have a 1 millisecond attack, which is honestly kind of fast, a 3-to-1 ratio, and I'm actually going to increase this release time 0.2 of a second. I'm just going to slow down the attack time a bit too. So you'll see here on the gain reduction meter how much I'm taking out at any one time. I never really want to go above 4 decibels of gain reduction because I'm not going to do one massive pass of compression. I'm going to do 3 small passes. And I find that to be a much more successful way to do dynamics control. It's much more subtle while still achieving a really great result, a really tight loudness range. This is Tom Kelly recording my voice on a Shure SM7b into an Apogee Ensemble, then being sent to a... All right, so it's always kind of compressing a little bit, never more than 4 decibels. That's amazing. I love that. Perfect. Next, I'm going to run the CLA-3A, which is a solid-state optical compressor. I am on the limiter mode, and what I'm really striving to achieve here is a constant 1/4 decibel of gain reduction, never going above 3. So by running Vocal Rider, which is boosting the lower portions, it is feeding the first compressor of the API 2500, a pretty quick VCA compressor. It's feeding it a rather even signal to begin with, and then that's just cutting down the big peaks, and it's rounding it off a little bit, but it's mostly doing like peak work. Now, the LA3A is a slower compressor. It's going to be a little bit colored, but what I'm hoping to get out of this compressor is depth and body. So this is like a longer term leveling of the entire recording, whereas the API is more like catching things in an instant. So what I'm trying to do here is get constant light compression over the entire episode. This is Tom Kelly recording my voice on a Shure SM7b into an Apogee Ensemble, then being sent to a Millennia STT-1 channel strip where I'm doing a little bit of EQ. All right, so again, looking for that constant 1/4 to 1/2 decibel of gain reduction. It's really going to tighten that stuff up. So I know that I only have one voice here, but I make a habit out of sending all my vocals into a vocal bus, which I will be doing a video on buses and sends and what all of that means. But just know that my voice is going from here, all of these plugins. I'm adding 7 decibels because we need to get to that -16 LUFS. And it's now going into my vocal bus. So the signal is being sent here before it then goes down into the master. The first thing I'm doing is I'm checking that I'm not sending too much signal into this bus here because I don't want to be clipping at any point in my signal chain. This is Tom Kelly recording my voice on a... All right, so we're far enough from 0 even on the loudest portion here. A little bit of EQ. The tiny... Perfect. Just want to make sure I'm not clipping anything. Mouth declick. Gotta have it. I pretty much run it on the factory default. I add a little bit of click widening, maybe 0.2. This is one of the most valuable tools, and it's one of the most often overlooked, I find, in a lot of podcasts. When you hear those cheek clicks, it's just the worst. I hate it so much. So I run mouth declick and it just gets rid of all of that stuff instantaneously. You might know that I love Soothe 2. This is a dynamic resonant suppressor. Basically any frequencies that are going to be overwhelming, it will temporarily reduce them. It reduces them based on how sensitive we make it to certain frequency ranges. We can see here that I've set it to be very sensitive to 420 Hertz, a little sensitive to 150. So again, we're trying to reduce a little bit of that proximity effect that's caused from being so close to this microphone. However, I like the sound of it. I just want to kind of tame it a little bit. And again, just focusing a little bit on these like very high frequencies and leaving the mids kind of alone. What I'm trying to do here is make sure that my audio is always mid-focused because that's where the intelligibility of the voice lies. A little bit of EQ. The tiniest bit of compression, like doing literally almost nothing. We can hear what it's removing from the signal when we click delta. A little bit of EQ, the tiniest bit of compression. So that's what it's removing, and we can hear before and after. This is before. A little bit of EQ, the tiniest bit of compression, like doing literally after. A little bit of EQ, the tiniest bit of compression, like doing literally almost nothing. So it's just removing some of these resonances that are usually harmonics of the fundamental and just rounding it out to further shine a greater spotlight on the frequencies that we enjoy and that we want to listen to more. The last thing I do is I add the SSL Buss Compressor, and this is just further compression, doing close to nothing. Again, I'm looking for like 1/2 to 1 decibel of gain reduction. And again, I'm only running my voice through this bus, but when you have multiple speakers, what this is actually doing is it's compressing the sum of all your voices. So if 2 people kind of talk at the same time, rather than compressing them individually, it's compressing them all together so that the sum of everything never gets too loud. So I could just put this on the end of my individual track to get further compression. I do like doing it after Soothe, so it's removing some of the resonance before it's compressing, but I just like to be in the habit of always kind of running a similar signal chain, and this is how I end every signal chain for all of my speakers. You can see it's doing just the tiniest bit. I'm introducing a little bit of the dry signal with this mix knob so that it's preserving a little bit of the dynamics. So basically what you're hearing is 83% of the compressed signal and 16.9 of the uncompressed signal. So a little bit of the before is coming through in the after compression. A little bit of EQ, the tiniest bit of compression, like doing literally almost, all right, so almost nothing again, right? So I have four Dynamics plugins doing very little. Over the course of the entire chain, it's actually doing quite a bit, but you never hear anything working too intensely, which is exactly what we want. Now I'm boosting another 2.4 decibels and I'm going into BX True Peak Limiter from Plugin Alliance, Brainworks. And I'm capping it at -2 decibels full scale or true peak. And I'm adding another 4.8 decibels here just to make sure I'm feeding my master here -16 LUFS. The reason I'm adding more gain here is because I don't want to feed too much into the plugin. You don't just clip at the end of the master. You can clip anywhere in your entire signal chain. So I want to make sure I'm not feeding too much signal to any plugin, to any bus, to anything. I want to do the final loudness at the very end to make sure nothing's clipping. A little bit of EQ, the tiniest bit of compression, like doing literally almost nothing. It is running on the tube topology with the transformer in. It's then going back into the Apogee Ensemble and being recorded into Pro Tools. So that is it. It looks like a lot. I mean, I have like 11 plugins running, and that might seem like a lot. A lot of people will be like, you don't want to run more than like 4 or 5 because then you're overdoing it. The thing is, my 4 compressors are doing less work than most people do with 1. So for me, it's a very intentional move to run kind of a lot of plugins doing very little, and of course making sure everything is gain staged, because with every plugin that you add, you're introducing one more possibility of clipping. So we want to make sure that we're gain staging everything so that nothing is clipping. So again, it looks like a lot, but you can actually get very similar results with a lot less. So don't feel like you need a Millennia channel strip or an Apogee Ensemble or even an SM7b to get a great sounding podcast. I'm going to show you in my other video. Again, you can check it out in the card above or a link in the description. You can get a really good sounding podcast using pretty much anything as long as you use it properly. So that's it for this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you all learned something. Maybe you were inspired by a tool you've never seen used, or maybe you want to incorporate more hardware into your production. I'd be really curious to hear how you are recording your podcast at home. So leave a comment. Let me know what gear you use, what plugins you like. If you have any opinions about what's going on with Waves at the moment, I'm recording this, May 29th. So they're going through some stuff right now. But let's have a conversation in the comments. We'll keep it polite, we'll keep it civil, and hopefully we're all here learning how to make a great sounding podcast and having fun in the process. That is the most important part of all of this. I want everyone to be having fun. This doesn't need to be difficult. It doesn't need to be stressful. It can be cheap. It can be fun. It can be challenging. And more than anything, it can be very rewarding. Thank you all so much. I can't express enough how much I appreciate you. This is a long video. If you made it to the end, hopefully by now I've earned your subscription and a like on the video. So feel free, you know what to do. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, share with a friend, yada, yada. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you. Bye, everyone.